Hey guys, tonight we're heading to the sun-scorched banks of the Nile. The air hums with heat, cicadas clicking from the tall papyrus reeds, and not a single cloud dares cross that ancient Egyptian sky. You're walking barefoot on packed earth that radiates like a stovetop, while a stray cat naps under a fig tree as if it were born immune to the sun. Spoiler, it wasn't. It's just too hot to move. You shade your eyes and squint at the whitewashed mud brick walls glowing like embers in the noonday glare. Sweat slides down your back in a way that reminds you of your least favorite gym class, and guess what? You haven't even made it to lunch. Welcome to Egypt, circa 1300 BCE. The temperature is real, your cotton tunic is already drenched, and you're about to learn how these ancient desert dwellers managed to not bake into human flatbread on the daily. Also, heads up, you probably wouldn't last a full day in this heat. No shame. Most modern folks wouldn't. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd also love to know, where are you watching from, and what time is it right now? Drop your city and time in the comments below. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shuffle past a group of men smoothing mud bricks in the sun. One of them looks up, sweat glistening on his forehead, and mutters something that probably means rookie. Everyone's working under this sky. You duck under a woven reed archway and into the shade of a narrow street between homes, tall, flat-roofed structures hugging one another like introverts at a family reunion. And immediately, you feel it. That sudden drop in temperature. It's not Arctic, sure, but it's noticeable. Almost pleasant. The walls here are made of mud brick, thick and porous, with a pale white coating of lime plaster to reflect sunlight. They're designed less like decorative facades and more like the Earth's own version of a thermos. These people knew how to insulate. They had to. Shade wasn't a luxury, it was the oldest survival tech around. You duck into one of the homes, just a basic structure, nothing fancy. 3 rooms, 1 tiny courtyard, a flat roof. The first thing you notice? It's dim. Not dark, just softly lit, like the inside of a clay oven before it's heated up. Light filters in from a small high window. No glass here, just a slitted opening covered by a woven mat. That's on purpose. These homes weren't trying to show off sunshine. They were engineered to control it. Historians still argue whether upper windows were more for ventilation or letting in moonlight, but either way, they served as natural regulators. Hot air rises, escapes up top. Cooler air drifts in low. It's passive airflow 101, and you don't even need a degree in architecture to feel it working. You sit on a low bench and immediately stand back up. Hot. You brush off the dust, pretending that was intentional. Your host, a cheerful man in his mid-30s wearing a linen kilt and absolutely no sweat stains, chuckles and points to a spot near the back wall where a damp reed mat rests over the doorway. That, he gestures, is the trick. Turns out, they didn't just build walls to fight the sun, they used water as an ancient coolant. Papyrus reeds or palm mats soaked in water were draped over doorways and windows. As the hot breeze from outside passed through the wet fibers, it cooled down. You get up, stand right in front of it, and inhale. It's not quite air conditioning, but you're no longer melting, and that counts. Modern engineers call this evaporative cooling. The ancient Egyptians just called it common sense. And while we're on it, here's a fun fact, some homes had jars of water placed near entryways with air passing over them for the same purpose. Science disguised as household clutter. Efficiency without even a single wire or plug. Now imagine being a brickmaker in this heat. You look down at your arms, smeared in imaginary mud, and groan. Even with tricks like shaded courtyards and cool mud brick interiors, most workers spent their day outside, toiling in the open. Cooling was something you appreciated at night or during those rare afternoon breaks. But don't be fooled, this wasn't just about comfort. Staying cool meant staying alive. Heat stroke wasn't called that, but it definitely existed. Dehydration? Constant risk. That's why, even centuries before Rome invented public baths, Egyptians were already designing their cities with temperature in mind. Of course, some people had it easier than others. You glance across the alley and spot a larger home, 2 stories tall, with wide overhanging eaves and trailing vines shading its walls. Someone wealthier lives there. Someone with options. But you? You're in the people's house. And that's where you learn the good stuff. The cat from earlier has followed you. It curls up in a dark corner and starts purring, low, steady, like a lullaby powered by sardines. You watch its belly rise and fall, and realize it's already napping. Probably knows all the cool spots. Literally. There's something magical about the simplicity here. No buzzing electronics. No synthetic chill. Just walls, water, wind, and a little bit of human stubbornness. You sit back down, this time avoiding the hot bench, and lean against the cooler plaster wall. The air smells faintly of clay and drying herbs. Someone's cooking lentils next door. You let your eyes close for just a second, promising yourself it's not a nap. You're not sure how much time passes, but when you open your eyes again, the sun outside has shifted. Shadows stretch longer, more forgiving. You wipe a line of sweat from your brow and think, okay. Maybe you would survive here, if someone else remembered to soak the reed mat. You rise slowly, blinking in the dim light of the mud brick home. The shadows now fall longer, cooler, and your body feels a little less like a forgotten loaf in an oven. You duck outside into the alleyway once again, greeted by the dry hush of a late afternoon in ancient Egypt, when even the Nile seems to take a nap. You follow your host, let's call him Amos, just because it sounds suitably noble, even though he swears he's just a humble bricklayer, through winding paths between clustered homes. The buildings hug one another, like they're sharing gossip and shade. And really, that's kind of the point. Ancient Egyptian homes weren't just plopped down wherever someone fancied. They were strategically packed, often sharing walls, oriented away from direct sun when possible, and with minimal exterior windows. This tight arrangement wasn't just good for privacy, it was good for cooling. Less exposure, less heat. It's almost like they figured out urban planning long before the modern world started layering cities in concrete and glass. You reach another doorway, slightly taller, more polished, and step inside. This one's different. Bigger. The air has a stillness to it. You sniff, yes, that's damp plaster, mingled with herbs and something sweet. Maybe honey? Maybe the absence of suffering? The floor here isn't just packed earth, it's covered in smoothed clay tiles. They're cool to the touch. You make a mental note to take your sandals off next time. The ceiling's higher, supported by wooden beams, and you can just make out slots carved into the upper wall, vents, probably. Or possibly for spirit cats to come and go. Hard to say. You run your hand along the interior wall. It's smooth, cool, and almost creamy under your fingertips. This isn't your average mud plaster, it's been finished with gypsum and lime, polished for that reflective quality. And the roof? Made of tightly lashed wooden poles, covered in reeds and mud, laid in such a way that heat rises and doesn't come back down. This whole place feels like it was built by someone who had lost enough sweat to value ingenuity. Historians still argue whether the average home had thatched upper vents like this or if those were luxuries reserved for richer households. But either way, the concept of passive airflow was widespread and weirdly intuitive. A breeze brushes past you, light but distinct. You turn your head. There's a narrow slit near the top of the back wall, open just enough to draw air through. This is no accident. The builders understood something modern developers still forget: cross-ventilation is a gift. They created subtle channels that moved air without fans, filters, or apps. You duck into a smaller room, likely a sleeping space. The walls here are thicker, the windows smaller. You reach out to touch the niche in the wall, a little storage spot, probably for linens or grain. But right now, it's holding something more interesting, a small clay vessel filled with water. The room smells faintly like rosewater and warm dust. And hanging above the door? Another papyrus mat, slightly damp. that mat isn't just decor. Once again, it's doing quiet work, cooling the incoming air with every lazy gust. You step back out into the courtyard. A fig tree shades half the space, and someone strung up strips of cloth between wooden poles, early sunshades, perfectly angled. In the center of the courtyard sits a shallow basin of water. Not big enough for bathing. Just sitting. Quiet. Still. Evaporating. You reach out and dip your fingers in. Cool. This water isn't for drinking. It's for breathing. As it evaporates, it takes heat with it. That's physics. Or magic. Or both. The Egyptians didn't care what you called it, as long as it worked. Your host points up. You crane your neck to see the rooftop, flat and sturdy with a slight lip to keep people from rolling off in their sleep. During summer nights, many families slept up there. More breeze, less stifling heat. And hey, stars included, no extra charge. But back down here, it's the courtyard that captures your attention. It's a living air conditioner. Enclosed, shaded, and built with walls that trap coolness like secrets. You sit on a stool near the water basin, and for the first time all day, you're not actively melting. Quirky detail time, some homes actually hung wet linen across windows, and even added crushed herbs or flower petals to the water, kind of like essential oils but with fewer Instagram influencers. The resulting air was cool, fragrant, and probably carried a bonus placebo effect. You inhale deeply. Mint? Lotus? Nile funk? A little of everything. Of course, not every Egyptian enjoyed this level of thoughtfulness. In more crowded urban areas like Thebes or Memphis, housing could be cramped, noisy, and far from ideal. Yet even there, people adapted, soaking mats, shading windows with pottery shards or hanging palm fronds. Comfort wasn't always easy, but it was always pursued. Your host waves a hand and hands you a shallow bowl of dates. As you munch absent-mindedly, you hear two kids laughing nearby, probably splashing water at each other while pretending they're mighty crocodiles. You peek through a slit in the wall and spot them, racing past, half-drenched and utterly carefree. It's almost enough to make you forget how hot it is. Almost. You lean back, letting your head rest against the wall. The sun is lower now, the world a little gentler. A breeze tiptoes in through the open vent, teasing the damp papyrus mat. You feel your shoulders drop. And for a fleeting moment, you're not a modern visitor. You're just another tired soul, grateful for a bit of shadow and a clever breeze. You stretch your legs out across the cool clay floor, toes brushing a shallow groove in the surface. It's not a crack, more like an intentional channel. A miniature trench running across the home's entrance. You lean down, tracing it with your fingers, and realize what it is: a water groove. A small path for pouring cool water that would flow slowly across the floor, evaporating as it went, lowering the temperature bit by bit. This isn't a palace. It's a modest family home. Yet even here, cooling wasn't just considered, it was baked into the design. Literally. Egyptians didn't invent evaporative cooling, but they certainly refined it. You follow the groove to the threshold, where once again, a familiar sight waits: the reed mat. Ah, the famous wet reed trick. You've heard about it already, but now it's time to see it in action. You help Amos lift the mat from its hanging position. It's woven from strips of papyrus, sturdy, slightly coarse, and naturally absorbent. He leads you to a ceramic jar nearby, filled with water. You dunk the mat in, watching as it darkens and takes on weight. Then, with a few efficient twists and slaps to shed the excess, it's rehung across the doorway. The breeze picks up. Nothing dramatic, just a lazy puff of wind, the kind you'd barely notice on an average day. But as it passes through the dripping mat, something amazing happens. The air cools. You step closer, standing right in its path. It's like being breathed on by a swamp, oddly comforting, moist, and several degrees more tolerable than the ambient furnace outside. You sigh in relief. Suddenly, the phrase "wet reed luxuries" takes on new meaning. Now here's the quirky bit: ancient Egyptian texts never directly mention cooling mats the way a modern instruction manual would. But through archaeological evidence, fragments of reeds near thresholds, water jars with spouts positioned at foot level, and paintings showing mats hanging over doorways, historians piece together a compelling picture. Still, there's room for debate. Some scholars argue the mats were just for shade or keeping insects out. Others say they were multifunctional, and cooling was part of the design. Historians still argue whether this practice was widespread or just common among families who lived near papyrus marshes, where reed mats were easier to make and replace. Either way, the logic is sound, and standing here now, you can't help but appreciate the engineering. Amos gestures for you to help hang a second mat over the window slit. Same method: dunk, squeeze, hang. You get a face full of cool droplets and laugh, half from surprise, half from sheer relief. The air inside this simple room changes within minutes. It's not icebox cold, but it's bearable, livable, even pleasant. You sit back down, letting the new breeze ruffle your tunic. In the corner, a reed basket holds more rolled mats. Clearly, this is part of daily life. Refresh, replace, repeat. And here's something modern FAC engineers might find humbling: all this cooling, with zero electricity, zero fans, and zero carbon emissions. Just reeds, water, and airflow. You glance around the room and spot another clever detail: a roof vent made from pottery fragments, stacked like a little chimney. Hot air rises and slips out through the vent. You swear you feel it working, like the room itself is gently exhaling. Your host tosses you a small palm fan, woven and stiff, and fans himself with another. It's ceremonial, sure, but it helps. In this world, everyone becomes part of the cooling system. The architecture does half the job, and you do the rest. And if you thought only humans got the benefits, think again. A cat pads silently into the room, tail swishing, and lies directly in the airflow path of the doorway mat. It stretches, sighs, and blinks at you like, took you long enough to figure this out. You fan yourself once, twice, then pause to listen. Somewhere nearby, you hear a low humming, a woman singing while pouring water onto another mat, her voice rising and falling like a lullaby for the house itself. The sensory experience is oddly complete: the cool touch of damp air, the soft flutter of reeds, the scent of earth and water, and the occasional chirp of birds fluttering from fig tree to rooftop. The Nile may be just beyond the street, glinting in the sun, but in here, it's easy to forget that the world beyond these walls is still a blazing furnace. You remember reading that many homes were designed with the cardinal directions in mind. Entrances faced north to catch prevailing winds, roofs were flat to allow for night sleeping. It wasn't just a matter of cultural tradition, it was climate adaptation long before the term existed. Ancient solutions for an ancient problem. You walk to the doorway, brush past the mat, and step into the courtyard again. This time, you notice subtle tracks in the clay floor, paths where water has been poured recently. There's a system here. Maybe a schedule. Maybe just habit. But it works. And if you think it's all DIY, think again. Professional mat weavers were a thing. They weren't glamorous, but they were essential. Everyone needed cooling, and not everyone could spend hours weaving reeds. As you sit back against the wall, a slow smile spreads across your face. This whole system, quiet, low-tech, efficient, isn't just cooling. It's calming. There's something inherently restful about knowing you're being looked after by a few humble reeds and a splash of water. The breeze shifts. The mat rustles. And for a moment, it feels like the house itself is breathing, deep, contented, and unhurried. You wake from a short nap you didn't intend to take, your head lolling gently against the plaster wall, mouth just slightly open, and a reed mat whispering softly in the afternoon wind. Amos is gone for the moment, probably off soaking more mats or bartering for onions. But before you can rise, you hear footsteps approaching, lighter, measured, and very UN mud brick house. A woman enters the courtyard. She's dressed in soft linen, with gold-edged sandals and a cone of scented wax resting delicately atop her head. Her skin is smooth, her posture precise. She nods politely, the way someone does when they're used to being bowed to. You've just been invited into the home of someone higher up the social ladder. Perhaps a merchant's wife. Perhaps the housekeeper of a minor official. Either way, her house tells a different story. This isn't just cooling. This is curated chill. She gestures for you to follow her into a more refined part of the home, still built from mud brick, but coated in a glossy white plaster that reflects both heat and status. You step inside, and instantly, the air feels cooler, denser, fragranced. You inhale something that smells faintly of lotus, frankincense, and, wait, is that cinnamon? In the center of the reception room is a low basin filled with water, surrounded by small green plants in clay pots. Palm fronds hang overhead, offering filtered light. Two boys are fanning the room with giant ostrich feather fans, not wildly, just enough to stir the air. It's not a palace, but it's trying. You take a seat on a cushioned stool, the cover made of finely woven flax. The wax cone on the woman's head has begun to melt slightly, releasing waves of perfume as it warms. This was common among wealthier Egyptians, a scented cone made from fats, oils, and crushed flowers. As it melted slowly through the day, it gave off fragrance and, bizarrely, a cooling sensation as the oil touched the scalp. Historians still argue whether the wax cone was worn constantly indoors, or just for formal events and special occasions. But there's a growing consensus that it had functional value, especially during social gatherings, both as deodorant and status symbol. You watch her move with grace, pouring cool water into small clay cups. There's no urgency here, no rushing. Time flows slowly when the heat demands it. Every gesture has purpose, every drop of water, every flinch of the feather fan. Then she leads you into an interior courtyard, not just a utility space like in Amo's home, but a luxurious retreat. There's a tiny water channel carved from limestone, fed by a cistern. It winds through the center of the courtyard, with papyrus plants growing along the sides and a few floating petals drifting across the surface. The water isn't flowing fast, but it doesn't need to. The evaporation is doing its silent, invisible work. You trail your hand through the channel. It's just deep enough to cool the skin, shallow enough to whisper serenity. This is more than engineering, it's artistry. The breeze from the higher clear-story windows draws the cooled air inward, circulating it through the living quarters. Nearby, an elderly servant is pressing damp linen cloths into wide ceramic jugs, placing them near windows and doorways. She wrings one out, climbs a small stool, and drapes it over a frame suspended near the ceiling. The cloth hangs like a droopy flag, dripping gently, cooling the air as it falls. You want to help. But you also kind of want to just sit here and let the world slow down. The woman turns to you and lifts a delicate clay perfume cone, smaller than the one on her head, and offers it. You hesitate, then press it lightly to your temples. The smell is clean, earthy, floral, like a garden that remembers the rain. She nods approvingly. The wealthy in Egypt didn't just cool their homes, they designed them to delight all the senses while doing so. That meant layered textures, smooth plaster walls, cool stone floors, linen curtains that swayed gently in the breeze. It meant color, pale blue and green tones, considered restful and cool to the eyes. It meant smell, lotus oil, sweet myrrh, cinnamon, and resin, all chosen to soothe and signal refinement. And of course, it meant water. Always water. Even indoors, water played a starring role. Jugs with damp cloths, bowls placed in the sun for evaporation, pools used for reflection, both visual and meditative. It was the air conditioner, the humidifier, and the aromatherapy diffuser of its time. You glance up at the ceiling. Hanging near the roof beams are bundles of reeds tied together, not decorative but functional, absorbing moisture and releasing it slowly. Some households even tucked reeds into crevices of the walls to encourage localized humidity. It's like living inside a botanical experiment. The woman claps her hands once, and a servant brings a small tray of pomegranate juice and barley cakes. You sip cautiously. The juice is warm, but strangely refreshing. Hydration, too, was part of the cooling equation. Rich or poor, everyone in Egypt understood that the key to surviving the day was keeping your insides cool, even if your outsides were sizzling. You feel it now, a lightness in your limbs, your breathing slowed. Not just from the temperature shift, but from the intentional quiet of the space. This isn't just architecture. It's therapy. A deliberate way of living that invites rest, reflection, and slow, measured movement. You lean back on the stool, eyes half-lidded, as the fanboys take up their rhythm again. The wax cone continues its slow melt, the perfume of Egypt past wafting across the room. You could stay here a while. Maybe until sundown. Maybe until the Nile changes course. Who's to say? The woman stands and beckons you further, through a side doorway shaded by fluttering linen curtains. You follow, your steps softened by a hallway floor that's been polished so smooth it feels cooler than it has any right to. The lighting here is dimmer, filtered through long strips of papyrus and fabric. The scent of perfumed wax lingers gently in the air, less distinct now, more like a memory of warmth and garden breezes. She stops at another room, opens the door, and gestures inward with a small smile. The ceiling here is higher, and tall clay jars are arranged neatly along the walls, all sealed with wax and linen stoppers. She taps the side of one jar, and a young attendant steps forward, breaking the seal and pulling out something you didn't expect, a massive palm fan. Not the kind you wave yourself. The kind someone else waves for you. In this room, cooling isn't just about design. It's a performance. You take your seat on a low wooden bench, and two boys begin rhythmically waving the fans from either side of you. The air is suddenly alive with motion, slow, intentional gusts that push away the afternoon heaviness. You glance across the room and realize the same setup surrounds a man reclining on a low couch, dressed in linen dyed with faint indigo and wearing a thick bead necklace. A scribe, maybe? Or someone's cousin who's pretending to be busy. This is personal cooling. VIP service. And there's more. The woman places something gently on your head, a fresh wax cone, still firm, still cool. It settles like a strange little hat, perfectly weighted. You're skeptical, until it starts to melt, and a soft trickle of fragrant oil slides behind your ear. Cooling. Comforting. Slightly ticklish. You close your eyes and lean into the breeze. Now here's the fun part, these fans? They weren't always human-powered. In some larger estates and temples, pulley systems allowed for the fanning of rooms mechanically, well, semi-mechanically. Someone still had to pull the ropes, but the flapping became smoother, less tiring. Historians still argue whether such contraptions were common or reserved for royalty, but tomb paintings suggest they weren't unheard of. Of course, the average Egyptian didn't have a fanboy in every room. But those who could afford it made cooling into a full-on art form. And it wasn't just about comfort, it was status. The quieter your home, the cooler your room, the slower your movement, the more obvious it became that you didn't need to rush, sweat, or labor. Cooling was a form of visual wealth. Even your body was curated for coolness. You glanced down at your tunic, thin, breathable, open at the shoulders. In contrast, the wealthy man across from you wears layers, loose and fine, designed not to trap heat but to swirl it away with every movement. His skin glistens faintly, not with sweat, but with oils. Lotus oil, probably. Cooling and scented, applied regularly to maintain both temperature and social expectations. The woman pours a little onto your hands, and you rub it in. The sensation is slippery at first, but as it absorbs, you realize it's drying faster than water would. Some oils, especially those mixed with mint or myrrh, created mild cooling effects on the skin, primitive but effective evaporative lotions. Outside, the sound of street vendors filters through, selling onions, bread, maybe even a little beer, but here, inside, it's like the world has slowed. This is the ancient Egyptian version of central air, a shade, space, scent, and soft human effort. You shift in your seat and notice something hidden in the wall, a small, slanted opening shaped like a triangle. The breeze flows stronger there. You ask what it is, and your host explains, with quiet pride, it's a wind scoop. Now this is cool, pun fully intended. Wind scoops, also known as malkav, were an innovation that predated modern air ventilation by thousands of years. A raised, angled shaft built into the architecture, designed to catch the breeze from outside and funnel it downward into rooms. In desert cities like Thebes, these were critical, especially on upper floors. They're still used in some Middle Eastern architecture today. No moving parts. Just clever physics. Historians still debate how early Egyptians adopted wind scoops in homes versus temples, but plenty agree the principle existed. And standing here now, with a breeze gliding past your cheek, it's hard to argue. Back in the room, the fans slow slightly. The boys are tiring. The breeze dips. You're almost disappointed. But then the woman gestures again, leading you outside, to a shaded veranda with linen drapes fluttering like lazy sails. There, a clay bowl of water sits beneath a tiny stool. You sit, dip your feet in, and sigh audibly. It's not even cold, just room temperature. But after all this dry heat, it feels like stepping into a cloud. A very small, toe-sized cloud. This was another form of cooling, targeted relief. Feet in water, head with wax, body with oil. A triple threat against the sun. And it worked. A servant brings a dish of cucumbers and dates. You eat slowly, savoring the crunch. Foods with water content helped beat the heat, too. Cucumbers, melons, even lettuce, they were less about calories and more about internal temperature control. You lean back in the chair, belly full, skin oiled, toes wet, forehead cool. You're not just surviving Egypt. You're thriving in it. At least for now. The veranda offers a glimpse of the Nile, a ribbon of glimmering silver in the distance. You can almost hear the rush of water against papyrus boats, the call of distant oarsmen. But here, the loudest sound is the sigh of fabric in the wind. You think again about those fans, the reed mats, the stone channels, and the cones slowly dripping down foreheads. It's a choreography. A dance of shade, breeze, water, and stillness. And in that moment, you feel it, that rare sensation of true, uncomplicated cool. A cat slinks past and joins you on the bench, purring before immediately stealing your foot bowl. You don't protest. You're too relaxed to compete with royalty. You eventually rise from the shaded veranda, feet pruned, and walk slowly through the hallway, cooled now not just by architecture but by sheer intention. Linen sways, clay whispers underfoot, and you've got the oil-slick forehead of someone who's officially mastered ancient chill. But now it's time to talk fashion, or rather, the lack of it. Because let's be honest, you've been sweating since sunrise, and the thought of dressing in anything heavier than a kitchen towel sounds like punishment. Luckily, the Egyptians had the same idea. You wander through the home and out into a side street. It's quiet now, the kind of heat-induced hush that makes even gossip feel like too much effort. And that's when you notice it, no one's wearing much of anything. Kids run barefoot in short linen skirts, men stroll by in knee-length kilts, and women are swathed in thin, sleeveless dresses that cling like dew and flutter like moth wings. Linen. It's everywhere. And there's a reason for that. Egyptian linen wasn't the scratchy stuff your grandma's tablecloth is made from. No, this was fine, breathable, often semi-transparent fabric spun from flax, a crop that thrived along the Nile's fertile banks. Spun tight, bleached in the sun, and worn proudly. Not just for style, but survival. You pass a weaver hunched over a loom, hands moving like water. Threads stretch and dance under their fingers, the product growing steadily into cloth finer than anything your average modern beachwear could manage. The cloth is light enough to let the breeze through and pale enough to reflect heat. This isn't a fashion choice. It's a climate strategy. You wipe your brow again and glance down at your own tunic. You've loosened the sash, rolled the sleeves, and are now considering a total costume re-evaluation. Linen loincloth, maybe? Or at least something sleeveless. You're not proud, you're just melting. And it wasn't just about what you wore, but what you didn't. Historians still argue whether working-class men went completely bare-chested during hotter seasons or whether modesty required a loose top layer. What we do know is that Egyptian tomb paintings and carvings suggest a range of interpretations, from minimalist to this is basically air. Shoes? Optional. Sandals made from palm fiber or leather were common, but inside the home, barefoot was standard. Floors were swept, smooth, and sometimes dampened slightly to cool the feet. Honestly, you're not sure how you ever wore socks in your former life. And don't think accessories were ignored. Jewelry, for example, wasn't just bling, it had practical benefits. Copper or faience beads warmed slowly in the sun, but stayed relatively cool against the skin. Wide collars and armlets helped protect sensitive areas from harsh rays. Some people even wore lightweight wigs, not just for vanity, but because shaving the scalp and covering it was cooler and easier to clean than battling wild, sweaty hair. You round a corner and stumble, quite literally, into a street market. Linen awnings stretch overhead, shading the narrow path. You feel the temperature drop at least 2 degrees just from stepping under it. Smart. Every stall is a burst of activity, even in this heat. You pass a linen vendor, with bolts of fabric stacked like loaves of white bread. A woman beside you lifts a length of cloth, runs it through her fingers, then raises it to the light. She squints, judging how well the sun shines through. If she can see her hand through the weave, it's probably breathable enough for summer. You smile. She nods. No words exchanged, just the shared understanding of people who know the value of a good breeze and a better outfit. At another stall, you spot something unexpected, a pile of perfumed wax combs, each nestled in small clay bowls. The vendor waves you over and pantomimes placing one on your head. You raise your eyebrows. He nods encouragingly. You pass, graciously, still slightly sticky from the last cone. He shrugs and turns to the next shopper, who's already reaching for a cone shaped like a lotus bud. Cooling, scented, and fashionable. A triple win. Further down the market, you spot something curious, a man squatting beside a basin of water, dipping strips of cloth and wrapping them around his arms and neck. Makeshift cooling bands. They're stained with crushed mint leaves, too. Another home remedy. Another example of using whatever nature offered to beat the heat. The smell of fresh herbs wafts over. A woman is grinding something green and bitter into a paste near a food stall. She pats it onto her neck, her temples. Some swear by this as an ancient cooling balm. Others say it's just to mask the scent of sweat. Either way, you're intrigued. You pass a group of children playing a slow, sleepy game involving pebbles and a circle drawn in the dust. They're all shirtless, all barefoot, and not one seems to be suffering. In fact, they're probably the coolest people on this whole street. Then a man passes by wearing a full-length robe, loose, flowing, pale blue, and somehow looking unbothered by the heat. You blink. How? Turns out, loose clothing can trap cooler air next to the skin while shielding you from direct sunlight. It's counterintuitive, but in dry heat, it works. Like your own mobile shade system. As long as the fabric breathes, the body can manage. Historians still debate whether color mattered, were lighter fabrics cooler, or did darker ones offer better protection from solar radiation? The answer seems to be, it depends. Context. Fabric. Fit. But the consensus is clear, linen wins. You step out of the market and into another shaded corridor of the residential district. A breeze picks up and dances through the narrow path. Your tunic flutters. The stickiness under your arms eases slightly. You smile, breathing deep. In this moment, surrounded by breezy fabric, barefoot kids, and street vendors who sell scented head combs, you understand something deep and ancient. Cooling wasn't just about architecture or mats or water. It was about rhythm. It was about moving slowly, dressing smartly, and letting the heat pass like a tide. Not resisted. Just endured, with grace. You glance up at the linen flapping above you and wonder how ridiculous you'd look installing one of these outside your apartment window back home. Evening begins its slow descent over the Nile Valley, and with it comes a noticeable shift. The blazing gold of the day fades into a hazier, softer amber. You feel it first on your skin, a slight easing, the edge of the heat blunted at last. Then you hear it. Doors creaking open. Low voices. Laughter. The city is waking up again. Because in ancient Egypt, night wasn't for hiding, it was for living. You follow a small group of neighbors as they begin climbing a narrow, winding staircase along the outer wall of a house. It's more like a ladder, really, carved into sun-baked mud brick and smoothed by centuries of use. One careful step after another, and you emerge onto the flat rooftop, an entire world unto itself. And just like that, the temperature drops. A real drop, not that if you stand still and breathe shallowly, maybe you'll sweat less type. A legitimate coolness. The breeze rolls across the rooftops like a whisper, lifting linen curtains and tugging at your hair. The sky overhead shifts from pale blue to dusky violet, with the first faint stars blinking to life. You look around and realize you're not alone. Rooftops across the neighborhood are filling with people. Families bring up clay jugs of water, reed mats to sit or sleep on, and trays of food still steaming from the evening hearth. Kids chase one another in soft, dusty bursts, their laughter carried by the wind. A cat makes a dramatic leap from one roof to another and is completely ignored, which clearly wounds its pride. This is Egyptian nightlife, less about parties, more about survival and socializing. With the sun finally gone, people reclaim their energy. You stretch your legs and feel a bit of life return to your body, like a plant wilting. Your host from earlier, Amos, still cheerful, still impressively dry, invites you to sit with his family on their rooftop mat. You do, cross-legged, knees cracking in protest, and are immediately handed a bowl of lentils and onions. Warm, comforting, faintly garlicky. You accept. This is when the real cooling begins. All day, the mud brick walls and clay floors absorb the sun's heat like a sponge. But now? Now they start to release it, slowly, steadily, into the cooler night air. It's like the buildings are sighing in relief along with you. The rooftop itself, bare and breezy, offers nothing for the heat to cling to. Here, exposed to sky and stars, is where Egyptians finally found rest. Historians still argue whether sleeping on rooftops was daily practice for all classes or only the working poor, but inscriptions and household records suggest it was widespread. Entire families slept on roofs through summer months, under linen canopies or the open sky, with water jugs nearby and damp cloths laid across their ankles. You spot one such jug now, glazed, narrow-necked, beaded with condensation. A girl dips a cloth into it and pats her forehead. Her little brother does the same, then overdoes it entirely and dumps half the jug on his head. The laughter returns. A gentle breeze snakes through the air, carrying the scent of grilled fish and crushed coriander. Someone nearby is playing a slow tune on a double-pipe flute, soft and reedy, like wind-given melody. You close your eyes for a moment, and it could be any night from any century. You open them again and look out over the rooftops. In the far distance, the wide ribbon of the Nile reflects the last of the sun like a mirror holding onto a secret. Closer by, torches and oil lamps flicker gently, pale glows marking household clusters, shadowed figures silhouetted in quiet routines. Amos gestures upward. You follow his hand. The stars are coming out in earnest now, including Sopdet, the star we call Sirius, which the Egyptians worshipped for its connection to the Nile's flooding. Its appearance heralded renewal, fertility, and, incidentally, the continuation of intensely hot days. But for now, with Sopdet winking overhead, you let the warmth of the lentils and the coolness of the breeze balance out in your belly. You lie back slowly, careful not to elbow anyone, and rest your head on a folded cloak. It smells faintly of dust, linen, and something else you can't name but associate with calm. A mother hushes her children. Someone nearby begins to hum. A clay jug gurgles as it's poured into shallow bowls. A light thudding sound, someone pounding dough, preparing tomorrow's bread in advance, under the stars. And then, a splash. You lean up slightly and peer across to another rooftop. Someone's installed a shallow basin of water there, maybe only a few fingers deep, and children are stepping into it one by one. The water shimmers under starlight, catching the glow from a nearby lamp. They stomp gently, splashing their ankles, laughing. This isn't just fun. It's cooling. Evaporative playtime, rooftop edition. You lie back down, smiling. A few rooftops over, you see a small stand of reeds swaying gently. Even here, high above the marshy edges of the Nile, people grow papyrus and palms in pots. Not for decoration, but for utility. Their mats, their baskets, their cooling tricks, all come from these humble, green stalks. Life, as ever, tied to plants and patience. The breeze picks up again. You pull a linen cloth over your chest, not because it's cold, but because the air is finally light enough to tease goosebumps from your skin. The moon rises quietly. Conversations fade. Children drift to sleep. Even the cat has stopped performing. You understand now why the rooftop was more than a place to rest. It was escape. Relief. Stillness. A temple of wind and stars and breath. In a world where daytime felt like punishment, night was the reward. You inhale deeply, warm lentils, cool linen, Nile mist, and exhale slowly. The bricks around you, still warm beneath your mat, hum like ancient heaters turned low. And above, a soft night breeze tells you you're safe, you're cool, and the worst of the day is over. You might actually sleep tonight. You wake to the soft call of morning birds and the distant splash of oars on the Nile. The sun isn't up yet, not fully, but a faint, dusty blue creeps across the sky, peeling back the last shadows of night. All around you, rooftops are stirring. Quietly. Slowly. Gently. As if everyone agreed that mornings shouldn't start with shouting. You sit up, rubbing your eyes. The bricks beneath your mat are cool now, like they've forgotten how hot they were just 12 hours ago. Your tunic clings a little less, and your hair, well, it's definitely full of rooftop dust, but who's judging? Amos is already up. Of course he is. Some people are powered by the sun, and you're starting to suspect he might be one of them. He nods a sleepy greeting and hands you a damp cloth, freshly soaked. You wipe your face, grateful. It's early, but the heat is coming. Again. Which means it's time to visit the real heroes of this story, the reeds. You descend from the rooftop, sandals slapping softly on the packed earth, and follow a small trail leading past the edge of the neighborhood and toward the marshy banks near the river. The sun is now cresting the horizon, a glowing orange disk rising slowly over low fields and swaying palms. Mist clings to the reeds in sheets, turning everything silver. The ground gets softer. Your sandals sink into mud. The air changes, too, thicker, damper, filled with that green scent of wet things growing. And there they are, tall, slender, and stubborn. Papyrus. You're standing in one of the many wetland patches that fed ancient Egypt, quite literally. Papyrus wasn't just for writing scrolls or making sandals. It was an essential part of the cooling toolkit. You crouch and run your fingers along the waxy stalk of one plant. It's smooth, light, almost hollow feeling. When split open, the inner pith is spongy, perfect for absorbing water, and, it turns out, for holding that water long enough to help cool air as it passed through. A natural, sustainable swamp miracle. Amos reaches down and yanks one from the mud with a practiced twist. He slices the stem with a curved blade and peels it lengthwise, revealing long, narrow strips. These will be soaked, dried, and woven into mats later today. He gestures for you to try. Your first attempt ends in a comedic splash. Mud, sandals, dignity, sacrificed in the name of climate control. Still, you manage to pull one, peel it, and laugh along with the others gathering reeds nearby. The work is sticky, earthy, a little fragrant in a weird salad kind of way. But even now, before it's woven or dried, the reed is already doing its job, keeping the marsh air cool and damp. Historians still argue whether Egyptians chose papyrus for cooling specifically, or if it was simply the most abundant, durable plant around. Some suggest palm leaves were used more frequently in southern regions, where papyrus didn't grow wild. Others insist it was a blend, whatever could be harvested, soaked, and woven, was fair game. Either way, it's clear these plants weren't just decoration. They were infrastructure. You follow the others as they load up bundles of reeds and sling them across their shoulders. Back in the village, a group of women sits in a shaded courtyard, weaving strips into mats with calloused fingers and laser focus. The rhythm of the weaving is almost hypnotic. Under over, beat with a stone, flip, repeat. You sit nearby, watching. One of the women, maybe in her 60s, hands you a partially finished mat. You hold it carefully, light but strong, damp in places, with a faintly sweet smell. She taps your elbow, points to the pattern, and nods. Ah, so we're doing this. You try. Really? But by the third pass, your weave looks more like a crumpled fruit basket than a useful mat. She smiles patiently, takes it back, and fixes it in seconds. Ancient Egyptian hospitality includes not mocking your complete lack of reed handling skills. Probably. Nearby, water jars rest in the shade, their clay exteriors damp with condensation. Some of the women dip the finished mats into the jars and hang them on pegs to dry, well, sort of. Not fully dry. Damp is part of the point. From here, they'll be distributed to homes for doorways, windows, courtyards. Some might even be cut into strips and used in makeshift evaporative coolers placed near beds. You're handed a small fan made from the same reeds, tightly woven, feather-light, surprisingly sturdy. You give it a test flick. A breeze. Not bad. Then someone brings out the real showpiece, a rolled mat nearly your height, meant to cover an entire household's main entry. When unrolled, it flops with a satisfying thump onto the packed dirt. The surface glints slightly in the sun, still damp from an earlier soaking. It's flexible, durable, ready. You help carry it to a home nearby, where it's hung over the doorway with string and small bone pegs. The mat sways gently, already anticipating the breeze to come. And that's the thing, this isn't technology you need to activate. It doesn't require your attention, your labor, or your prayer. It just works. The reeds absorb water. The sun heats the air. The breeze moves through the mat. The air cools. Over and over, every day. A self-repeating cycle. Nature doing the heavy lifting. You lean against the wall, watching the mat flutter. You hear it again, that soft rustling, that hush. A noise so small, you wouldn't notice it in the city. But here, it's the sound of comfort arriving. And you realize, these weren't just tools. They were companions. The same way we might turn on a fan and sigh in relief, an Egyptian stepping into a shaded room with a fresh reed mat would know, yes, the worst is over. You've made it through the sun. You're home. The morning sun climbs higher. It's not oppressive yet, but it's coming. The people here are ready. The mats are in place, the jars are filled, and the reeds, fresh from the swamp, are already whispering cool secrets into the breeze. You take one last look at the fields behind you. The tall green stalks sway. Patient. Ancient. Always growing, always helping. Just enough to make life not just bearable, but beautiful. By midday, the sun is once again glaring down like a furious deity. You've retreated indoors, wisely, and are perched on a low stool beneath the shade of an archway, watching sweat form slow rivers down the curve of a clay jar nearby. Someone just refilled it, placing a damp cloth over the mouth, and even without a sip, it looks refreshing. That's the thing, staying cool in ancient Egypt wasn't just about your surroundings, it was about what you put into your body, too. You're ushered to a long, low table where Amo's family is gathering for the day's main meal. A woven reed tray is passed around, piled high with flatbread still warm from the hearth. There are bowls of lentils, plates of dates, a small pyramid of cucumbers, and, most importantly, a clay jug filled with something golden, foamy, and slightly tangy-smelling. Beer. Yes, you're about to hydrate with ancient Egyptian beer. Before you can politely decline in favor of water, someone fills your clay cup and gestures that it's rude not to drink. So you do. It's thick, grainy, and has floating bits of bread in it. Not exactly happy hour material. but surprisingly cooling and filling and comforting in a grandma made this with care kind of way. No ice cubes, no fizz, no caramel coloring, just fermented barley, water, and a little wild yeast doing its thing. You learn quickly that this isn't party beer. It's daily beer. Working class hydration. Brewed by women, often at home, and served with most meals. Even children drank it, though their versions were probably weaker. Beer helped replace electrolytes and kept people full during long, hot work days. Plus, boiling the mash during brewing made it safer to drink than raw river water, which, as you can imagine, had its share of crocodilian contaminants. Historians still argue whether Egyptian beer had much alcohol at all, or whether it functioned more like a porridge with attitude. Regardless, it was beloved, ubiquitous, and, let's face it, part of every decent cooling plan. As you sip, someone hands you a slice of cucumber dipped in sour milk. It's tangy, creamy, and again, surprisingly good at making the heat feel less aggressive. Cucumbers weren't just popular, they were sacred in their own vegetable way. High in water, easy to digest, and grown along canals and shady garden plots, they were a literal cool bite in a hot world. Next, a bowl of boiled fava beans with coriander is passed your way. You dig in, ignoring the voice in your head that swears fava beans need cheese. They don't. They just need a breeze, and maybe a palm leaf fan. You look around the table. No one's rushing. No one's gulping. Everyone is eating slowly, in the shade, in silence. It's not a feast, it's a ritual. Hydration and nourishment are being given the attention they deserve. After all, this meal isn't just about surviving the day, it's about preparing to face the afternoon. Someone starts slicing dates and stuffing them with crushed nuts. A child adds a drop of honey to each one like it's the most serious job in the world. You eat one, and it practically melts on your tongue. There's no refrigeration, no ice, no sorbet to dream of. But the combination of high-water fruits, cool shade, and slow chewing does something no popsicle ever could: it calms you. Deeply. A clay pot nearby is cracked open to reveal a kind of yogurt, soured goat's milk mixed with mint and a bit of salt. You try it, and it hits like a heat wave in reverse. The salt helps your body hang on to moisture, the mint cools your tongue, and the sourness somehow makes the room feel 10 degrees cooler. Or maybe that's just your imagination. Either way, you want more. Quirky historical aside, some Egyptians used to soak bread in water, mix it with herbs, and then drink the resulting paste. It's hard to tell whether that was a poor man's meal, a cooling potion, or just a weird culinary flex. Historians, again, are split. But it's clear that waterlogged bread was not off the menu. After lunch, Amos leans back, sips the last of his beer, and exhales deeply. The entire household follows suit, full, hydrated, and drowsy. Someone begins rolling out mats in the corner for a midday rest. And yes, you guessed it, they've been soaked earlier in the morning, now cool and ready to lull you into a gentle, beer-fueled nap. A boy walks over with a fan and fans his grandmother's face with the kind of focused solemnity reserved for temple rituals. She smiles and closes her eyes. You're handed a bowl of tamarind juice, a tart, earthy, deep brown liquid that looks slightly suspicious but tastes like the Nile itself sighed into your mouth. Cooling, sour, slightly sweet. It's rare here, usually imported from Nubia, but it's known to reduce heat in the body. You think about that, people moving goods across borders, not for gold or conquest, but to feel a little cooler in summer. Priorities. You lean back on your mat, stomach full, head buzzing faintly, not from alcohol, but from the complete sensory slowdown of ancient Egyptian lunchtime. No screens. No microwaves. No ice cream trucks. Just cucumbers, tamarind, beer, bread, and peace. Outside, the sun is still blazing. The world still bakes. But inside this courtyard, where people eat deliberately, fan each other with woven leaves, and sip tangy drinks made from desert fruits, it feels manageable. Even beautiful. You close your eyes. Someone lays a cool cloth on your forehead, and for a moment, you are nothing more than another happy stomach in a land that mastered the art of edible air conditioning. You stir from your midday rest with the grogginess of someone who's just been hugged by a large, warm cat. The mat beneath you has dried slightly in the heat, but it's still cool where it touched the clay floor. A gentle breeze slips into the courtyard, and you blink up at the movement of palm leaves overhead, like slow dancers keeping time with the sun. You sit up. Your limbs feel heavy but in a nice way, like you've been resting in the belly of the earth. Around you, the household begins to wake as well. Water jugs are passed. A few damp cloths are re-soaked and laid across necks and shoulders. No one speaks above a whisper. It's the sacred hour of post-nap peace. But today, there's something special planned. Amos' neighbor, a middle-aged man with surprisingly well-oiled elbows, has invited you to visit the local temple district. Not as a pilgrim, not as a scholar, but as someone interested in how the gods themselves kept cool. And honestly, after the day's heat, divine air conditioning sounds like a plan. You follow him through town, sandals slapping quietly on the dust, passing homes and shops that grow quieter the closer you get to the temple. Eventually, massive stone walls rise around you, etched with sun-bleached hieroglyphs, each groove deep enough to hold a shadow. And then you step inside. Cool. Instant. Stunningly so. The difference is not subtle, it's like walking into a stone refrigerator. You stop in your tracks and breathe it in. The temperature hasn't dropped 30 degrees or anything, but the stillness, the absence of sun, the density of air, is enough to make your skin sigh. The walls here are thick, sometimes over 2 meters, and made of heavy limestone that takes all day to warm up and all night to cool down. The floor beneath your feet is cold to the touch, even this late in the day. Light filters in through high slits, small, narrow, intentional. This place wasn't meant to be bright. It was meant to be enduring. The temple architecture wasn't just about grandeur, it was about thermal mass. The Egyptians knew exactly what they were doing. By building massive structures of stone with limited windows, they created cool microclimates where priests, workers, and sacred objects could be protected from the heat. Historians still argue whether these cooling effects were a happy side benefit of religious architecture or a deliberate element of divine design. But considering how carefully these temples were aligned with solar movements and seasonal cycles, it's hard to believe cooling was an afterthought. You walk slowly through the hypostyle hall, a forest of stone columns stretching toward the heavens, each one wide enough to hide behind. The shade they throw is not just generous, it's complete. Shadows curl around the base of each column like the folds of a linen robe. And above you, tiny clerestory windows allow shafts of light to pierce through, but not heat. The air feels dense, quiet, like it's been sitting for thousands of years. Which, in a way, it has. You're shown into a side chamber, used by priests to rest, prepare incense, and store offerings. Even here, cooling was part of the daily routine. Basins of water are embedded into the floor, some still holding a shallow pool. Damp mats hang by the doorway. Reed fans lean against walls in carefully arranged bundles. And on a low stone bench rests a wide, shallow vessel filled with lotus petals floating on water, perfume and hydration, all in one. Your guide hands you a small bundle of cloth, damp, scented with myrrh. You press it to your neck and immediately feel the air around you cool further. The scent rises like a spell. It's sleepy, slow, sacred. Even the gods like to breeze, apparently. You move deeper into the temple, past storerooms and quiet alcoves, until you reach the innermost sanctum. It's smaller than the outer halls, darker, and more echoing than you expected. The walls seem to hold sound in place, absorbing some, amplifying others. A priest is sitting cross-legged near a large stone basin filled with water. He dips a feather into the surface, stirs it once, and raises it gently, letting drops fall onto a piece of linen. You watch as the cloth is laid across a small niche in the wall, perhaps to cool a stored scroll, or maybe just to refresh the air around a sacred object. The ritual isn't hurried. It's contemplative. Quiet. As though the act of cooling is itself a form of worship. And honestly, it is. In a land ruled by the sun, making peace with heat wasn't just physical, it was spiritual. Temples offered more than theological comfort, they gave bodies a place to breathe. You walk back toward the main hall, and someone hands you a fan, a simple one, woven from palm leaves, dyed faint blue. You hold it up, wave it once, and feel your own little breeze against your cheeks. A group of children passes through, laughing and whispering. One of them is carrying a water jar wrapped in linen, balanced on her head. It's leaving a trail of faint drops on the stone floor. You smile. Even here, even among gods, people are just trying to stay cool. You step back out into the world, blinking in the sudden light. The heat returns, not cruelly, but confidently. Still, the memory of the stone temple, the cool basin, the whispering column stays with you. And as you walk back toward town, you pass a small shrine tucked beneath a tree. Inside is a statue of a minor household deity, shaded by a linen cloth, and surrounded by bowls of water. Someone has even tied a damp mat nearby to flutter in the breeze. Because even the little gods, it seems, enjoy a good cool down. You return from the temple with a mild sunburn on your shoulders and a cooler soul. The walk back is slower, everything in Egypt seems slower by design, or maybe that's just the heat convincing you to move like you're underwater. Still, as you near the residential quarter again, you catch a sound that snaps you back to life, a bray, loud and indignant. Around the corner, you find the source. A donkey, ears flattened, swishing its tail furiously under a canopy of dried palm fronds. It's got a cloth draped over its back that's visibly damp, and someone, probably its owner, is diligently splashing water onto its hooves from a cracked ceramic bowl. Turns out, humans weren't the only ones who needed creative cooling techniques in ancient Egypt. The animals got their own version of spa treatment, too. You duck into Ahmo's courtyard again and find a similar scene. His daughter is crouched beside a pair of goats, rubbing wet cloths over their legs and ears, cooing gently like it's a bedtime routine. She even has a fan tucked under her arm. You watch as she gives them each a quick puff of air and then a pat on the head. The goats bleat softly in approval. Ancient Egyptian livestock, donkeys, oxen, goats, cats, even monkeys, were vital to daily life. And in a land where temperatures easily soared above 100 degrees Fahrenheit, keeping animals cool wasn't kindness. It was basic survival. One particularly delightful papyrus illustration you remember from somewhere shows a monkey being fanned by a servant. Another shows a duck sitting in what looks suspiciously like a bowl of water, looking blissfully annoyed. Whether that's exaggeration or observation is up for debate, but the sentiment holds. Historians still argue whether animal cooling rituals were common across all classes or mostly limited to wealthier households and temple compounds. After all, sacred animals like cats and ibises were certainly pampered. But the common donkey? Well, they did a lot of walking and sweating, and they got their share of TLC, too. In Ahmo's backyard, a makeshift shade tent has been set up, 3 poles lashed together, draped with a water-soaked reed mat. Beneath it lies the family's cat, sprawled belly up, tail flicking once every minute. You're fairly sure it hasn't moved all day. And judging by the clay bowl of water nearby, someone has been refilling its private drinking supply. A hen struts past, eyeing the bowl, and the cat lazily smacks its paw into the air as if to say, "Not today, feathered peasant." You ask Ahmos about this particular cooling method, the damp shade hut, and he nods. Simple physics, he says. The mat cools as water evaporates, the heat rises and drifts away, and the animals stay shaded and dry. It's the same concept as the door mats and window hangings you've seen, just scaled down for 4-legged companions. He shows you another trick. Along the wall of the courtyard, there's a long feeding trough made of smoothed clay, and beside it, a set of flat stones that have been soaking in water all morning. These stones, when placed near the animals, radiate gentle coolness for hours. Like mini ice packs, minus the ice. And the pigs? When it gets truly hot, they're led to a corner of the garden where a patch of mud is kept deliberately wet. They roll in it, snort contentedly, and come out looking like dessert with legs. You wrinkle your nose, but also, you get it. Mud is insulation. Mud is moisture. Mud is comfort. Even birds weren't ignored. Shallow clay basins were scattered throughout homes and courtyards, filled with water and often shaded with palm leaves or left under the eaves. You spot a pigeon splashing in one now, ruffling its feathers like a delighted toddler. You think back to your own life, metal bowls for pets, maybe a fan in the corner, if they're lucky. Here, in 1300 BCE, the animals seem not just cared for, but considered. And why wouldn't they be? Cats were sacred. Cattle were symbols of divine fertility. Monkeys, birds, beetles, each one had a place in mythology and daily life. Cooling them wasn't just practical. It was part of the order of things. You sit near the cat, who promptly ignores you, and watch a young boy refill the mud wallow for the piglets. The air smells like clay and damp straw and something vaguely leafy. Probably basil or fenugreek. The kind of herbal detail that clings to ancient skin. You spot a small jug resting beside the goat shelter. It's filled with water and chopped lotus stem. Not for drinking, just for scent and cooling. When poured near the animal bedding, it keeps the area fresh and faintly floral. You raise an eyebrow. Amos shrugs. Goats deserve ambience, too. There's one final detail that makes you grin, a miniature fan, woven from reeds, tied to a stick, and left spinning in the breeze above a clay coop. You point, amused. Amos grins. For the chickens, he says. They don't know it helps, but they seem calmer. And you realize something else, these people didn't have a word for sustainable, but they lived it. Everything, cooling, feeding, sheltering, was tied to what they had on hand: clay, water, plants, wind, rhythm. Animals weren't managed. They were cohabited with, shared with, lived beside. You stand again and wipe your hands on your tunic. The cat follows you for 2 steps, then flops in the dirt. A goat bleats, unimpressed. The donkey from earlier brays again, clearly unsatisfied with the breeze. You chuckle. Egypt may have been built by kings and gods, but its real heartbeat? That's goats in the shade and donkeys under wet mats. And you, once again, are just trying to keep up. You're back in the shaded corner of the courtyard again, sipping a weak beer and listening to the soft shuffle of evening chores. Someone's re-wetting the reed mat hanging in the entryway. A jug gurgles. Clay jars are being wiped down with damp cloths, lined up with the precision of someone who believes that cool water is a form of virtue. You glance to your left and find yourself staring at a bowl of something. It's beige. Grainy. Sticky-looking. Amos catches your eye and grins. He scoops up a bit of the paste and pats it gently onto his neck and shoulders. He hands you some. You hesitate. He raises an eyebrow, then gestures toward the sun. It's only halfway down, and already your skin is radiating its complaints. You scoop a bit. It smells faintly earthy and, well, odd. Is that aloe? Clay? You rub it onto your arm, and the coolness is instant. And soothing. And? Wait. Is that? Yes. Yes, that's definitely crocodile dung. Welcome to ancient Egyptian skincare. You freeze mid-rub, eyes wide. Amos chuckles. He waves his hand dismissively. Just a little, he says in ancient Egyptian, which, to your sleepy brain, you somehow now understand because dream logic, mixed with herbs. And just like that, you've joined the ranks of history's most surprising beauty influencers. See, the ancient Egyptians didn't have sunscreen as we know it, but they weren't foolish about the sun. They knew its danger. Knew its power. And they tried everything to protect themselves from its more blistery blessings. Including smearing concoctions of mud, clay, plant oils, and yes, occasionally crocodile excrement across their skin to prevent burns. Historians still argue whether the crocodile dung method was truly protective or more of a magical ritual, invoking Sobek, the crocodile god, as a kind of divine SPF. There's also debate on whether it was more symbolic than routine. But traces of these pastes have been found, and references do pop up in medical papyri. So, it happened. And you're wearing it. Your skin, for the record, feels amazing. You wipe your hands on a cloth and are handed another cooling mixture, this one more conventional, aloe and honey, mashed into a paste and cooled in a ceramic pot sunk halfway into the ground. A primitive refrigerator. You apply it cautiously to your cheeks and arms and immediately feel your skin calm down like a cranky toddler given a soft blanket. Nearby, Amo's daughter is mixing something in a shallow bowl. Ground barley, milk, and crushed mint. She smears it across her legs, sits back, and lets the breeze do the rest. Cooling paste. Hydration pack. Ancient spa. There's more. One woman is carefully rubbing oil into her scalp, the smell of cedar and myrrh thick in the air. This not only softened the skin and cooled the head but doubled as insect repellent. Smart. You're handed a stick with a curled end, kohl applicator. Apparently, it's time for eyeliner. You raise your eyebrows. Really? Amos nods. So you go for it. The black paste, stored in a tiny ceramic pot, is applied to the lower lid, then the upper. It doesn't sting. In fact, it's cooling. A little gritty, sure, but it comes with an unexpected bonus: less glare. That's right. Those bold lines seen on countless Egyptian statues weren't just for style, they helped reduce the sun's reflection. Like proto-sunglasses. Bonus? Some of the minerals used, namely galena, may have had mild antibacterial properties. Possibly even helped with eye infections. Or maybe just looked great on temple murals. You blink slowly. Everything seems sharper, darker around the edges. You feel cooler. Somehow also cooler in the swagger sense. You spot a boy patting what looks like damp clay onto his feet and ankles. A trick to keep his soles from burning during mid-afternoon errands. Another woman is brushing finely ground ochre mixed with oil onto her shoulders. Not just decoration, it's believed some colored clays helped reflect sunlight and tone the skin. A shallow dish of fresh mint leaves sits near the center of the courtyard. Every so often, someone plucks one, chews it slowly, and breathes deeply. Internal cooling, they say. You try it. It tastes sharp, clean. Your next breath feels like it was filtered through a mountain stream. You're beginning to understand something important. Cooling wasn't just an act, it was a lifestyle. An aesthetic. A ritual. The body wasn't merely something to be endured in the heat. It was something to be cared for, soothed, and celebrated, even when the sun was doing its worst. In the corner, someone is stringing together beads made of faience, bright blue, smooth to the touch. Cool stones against the collarbone, offering a soothing temperature and a splash of color. You run your fingers over one. It hums faintly with the chill of shade. You sit back, your entire body now basted in some combination of mint, clay, honey, and yes, just a hint of crocodile legacy. The breeze returns, and you feel it, not just on your face or arms, but through your very bones. You're cool. Deeply cool. A girl walks past carrying a small reed tray filled with flower petals and damp cloths. She lays one on each person's forehead, smiling softly as she does. This, apparently, is the final touch. The exhale after the effort. The signature on a slow, deliberate painting. You lean your head back. Your cloth smells of lotus. Your skin sings. Your eyes blink slowly beneath a line of kohl that could make a pharaoh jealous. And for the first time today, the sun feels irrelevant. You don't fight it. You don't fear it. You simply outlast it. With reeds, oils, plants, rituals, and grace. And maybe, just maybe, a little poop. The sun is beginning its slow descent once more, dipping toward the western horizon like it's finally ready to take a hint. You sit in the courtyard, glazed in cooling pastes and softened by shade, when a boy darts by, tugging your arm with all the excitement of someone about to reveal a secret. He says one word, Pare. The palace. Okay, not the palace, as in Pharaoh's gold-encrusted mega-mansion. But a local noble's estate large enough to host festivals and display wealth. Apparently, today's a special day. You've been invited, along with what appears to be half the village, to witness something both ordinary and extraordinary: how the elite played with water. You follow the growing procession down winding alleys and along an irrigation channel that glimmers in the setting light. The houses thin out, the trees grow taller, and then you see it. Not a temple. Not a fortress. A villa. High walls, curved archways, and beyond them? A garden. You blink. A real garden. In Egypt. In this climate. And then you hear it, the soft, unmistakable sound of water. Trickling, splashing, burbling. Music for the overheated soul. As you step into the courtyard, the air changes. The scent of blooming flowers, lotus, mandrake, even jasmine, floats on a cool breeze. Palm trees stretch toward the sky, shading symmetrical rows of greenery. And in the center of it all, a large rectangular pool. Perfectly still. Lined with blue tiles that reflect the fading light. Lily pads float lazily along the surface. A frog croaks once, then thinks better of it. You catch your breath. Because it's cooler here. Not just psychologically, but physically. This isn't by accident. The pool isn't for swimming, it's for ambience, temperature control, and status. And possibly the occasional lazy splash war. Historians still argue whether pools in noble homes were used primarily for ritual cleansing, cooling leisure, or social flexing. But the truth, as usual, seems to be all of the above. Around the edges of the pool, servants are placing wide, shallow bowls of water, decorated with petals, some with mint leaves or even whole cucumbers. Why? As the water evaporates, it cools the surrounding air. You've seen this before, but never in such concentrated glory. Children dart around, dropping lotus buds into the pool and trying to balance them upright. Two boys paddle on clay boards near the edge, while their father sighs dramatically and pretends he doesn't want to join them. You're handed a wet linen sash, twisted and cool, and shown how to wrap it around your neck like a mini scarf. It drips lightly, and when the breeze hits, heaven! You spot someone else with one wrapped around their wrists, another tied as a headband. Ancient Egypt meets athletic sweatband. Fashion and function. A tray arrives, carried by two smiling girls, and on it, chilled dates, fig paste wrapped in damp lotus leaves, and small cups of something pink. Pomegranate juice, slightly watered down. Sweet, tart, and just the right temperature. It's served from a jug that's been partially buried in cool earth, a method you now deeply appreciate. Another guest is fanning herself with a reed fan shaped like a palm frond, its ends dipped in water so that each gust leaves a trace of mist. You nod approvingly. That's some next-level cooling. Then, without warning, a splash. You turn just in time to see a servant accidentally drop an entire jar of water into the edge of the pool. Everyone gasps. The noblewoman in charge, dressed in crisp linen with gold cuffs and utterly unfazed, laughs softly and waves her hand. Moments later, 3 children leap in, fully clothed, shrieking with delight. And just like that, it becomes a party. You step closer, and someone gently splashes your sandals with cool water. It's an invitation. You sit by the edge, roll up your tunic, and dip your feet in. The water is perfect. Not cold. Not warm. Just relieving. You close your eyes and let your body go still. Around you, the sounds of joy, laughter, and the splash-splash of graceful chaos create a kind of music. This isn't just luxury. It's medicine. Water in Egypt was life, spiritually, agriculturally, and socially. It was sacred. To float, to splash, to sit near it was to claim a moment of peace in a land that could otherwise roast you like an overconfident beetle on a black stone. The walls of the villa are lined with low benches, each with mats freshly dampened and scented with cinnamon bark and crushed papyrus. You find one and lie down, the scent rising into your nostrils like a bedtime story. You open one eye and notice a curious contraption, a hanging reed basket, filled with wet clay pots, suspended over the pool. As the water inside the pots evaporates, the breeze draws that cool, moist air over the garden. Another passive cooling system. Another reason the air here feels like a lullaby. Even the garden layout matters: tall trees on the perimeter to block sun, medium shrubs to trap cool air, ground cover plants to reduce dust and heat reflection. You're in a microclimate. A pocket of engineered calm. One guest, clearly a regular, brings out a game board and lays it beside the pool. Senet, the ancient Egyptian board game of choice. You don't know the rules. That's okay. The act of playing, here, beside the water, as the sun slips away. That's enough. Someone begins to sing, a soft tune, repetitive, hypnotic. A breeze carries the sound toward you, along with the scent of wet reeds and floral oil. The pool ripples faintly. The breeze cools your damp neck. You can feel the heat leaving your body, not all at once, but slowly. Respectfully. As if it knows it's no longer welcome. You lean back, staring at the deepening twilight. The first stars appear. The laughter fades into murmurs. And in that moment, surrounded by water, shadows, breeze, and gently snoring nobility, you realize you don't just feel cool. You feel weightless. You leave the villa reluctantly, your skin still slightly damp, your toes pruny in the most satisfying way. The stars above have multiplied, blanketing the sky in that special Egyptian clarity, no neon signs, no electric hum, just black velvet and pinpricks of ancient light. As you walk, the breeze picks up, tugging gently at your tunic, now half-dried from the splash party you didn't plan to join. The road home is familiar now: mud brick walls, narrow alleys, the occasional papyrus mat fluttering like a friendly wave. You pass a row of homes, their windows slitted and shuttered, their rooftops freshly swept for the night's sleep. A boy is carrying a jar of water upstairs. Another is dragging a damp reed mat, heavy and dripping, up the ladder to hang across a rooftop entrance. It's routine, but there's elegance in the rhythm. Back at Amo's house, you pause outside the courtyard and glance up. The reed mat over the entry is darkened with fresh moisture. You push through it and immediately feel the difference. Cooler. Softer. A hush wraps around you like a welcoming shawl. Inside, the household is preparing for bed. Oil lamps flicker against the plaster walls, casting sleepy shadows. The scent of lotus oil mingles with baked earth and something faintly sweet, maybe crushed date seeds simmering on a small fire. But instead of going straight to the sleeping mats, Amos beckons you over with a grin. He's crouched beside a jar, lifting something from it with exaggerated care, a slab of limestone. Flat, thin, about the size of a dinner plate. He sets it on the floor, sprinkles water across it, then places it in the corner near his mat. You raise an eyebrow. He taps the stone and says a word that probably means, "Trust me." Turns out, the ancient Egyptians had their own version of climate science. Using limestone and other dense materials as passive radiators, they would store coolness during the night, or retain a gentle dampness after water was applied. As the air moved over the surface, it cooled slightly. Not ice pack levels of relief, but enough. And enough, in this world, was everything. You help lay out the other sleeping mats. Each one has been brushed clean, dusted with dried mint leaves, and slightly dampened along the edges. Someone has even tucked in bundles of lavender and fenugreek near the pillows, not for bugs, though that's a nice bonus, but for the scent. Then you spot the night jar. It's nestled in the corner, half buried in earth, draped in cloth, and beaded with condensation. Inside, cool water. For sipping. For refreshing a cloth. For pouring lightly over one's chest if the night grows too close. One ladleful at a time. You lie down. The mat is soft under your spine, and above you, the plaster ceiling catches just a whisper of starlight from the rooftop slit. The air is still. The kind of still that carries the promise of silence. Of rest. Someone sets a damp cloth over your ankles. You don't even open your eyes. It's already cool. Then, with a creak and a few rustling feet, the family begins climbing to the rooftop. You follow, half asleep, mat in hand, and ascend once more into the domain of wind and sky. The rooftop has been prepared again. Mats unrolled, jugs placed within reach, cloths draped gently across the low brick boundary like sleepy flags. You lie back once more, this time directly beneath the stars. A breeze brushes past. Faintly, somewhere down the street, a flute begins to play. The same lazy melody you heard on your first day here. Slow, reedy, like it's been playing for 4,000 years. And as you breathe in herbs, dust, cool linen, a fading trace of lotus, you realize that this, right here, is the most sophisticated cooling system of them all. Stillness. Not the frantic chill of modern fans, or the artificial frost of air conditioning. But stillness designed by architecture, enhanced by ritual, and sustained by water, reeds, stone, and memory. You think back on everything you've seen. The evaporative genius of soaked papyrus mats. The delicate scent cones and wax drips. The pools in noble gardens, the fans woven from reeds. The beer, the cucumbers, the mud-coated pigs. The cracked-dung sunscreens, the wind-catching towers. The shaded courtyards, the temple stone, the rooftop lullabies. And somehow, it all clicks into place. Every practice, every habit, every clever workaround wasn't just about keeping cool. It was about creating pause. Inviting the body to rest. The mind to float. The day to soften. You close your eyes. A cloth is laid gently over your chest. Someone murmurs a prayer, not loudly, not for the gods, maybe just for themselves. And beneath the stars, on this rooftop in ancient Egypt, you let go. The stars spin slowly overhead. Or maybe it's just your thoughts, untethering from the heat of the day, drifting lazily between memory and dream. Around you, the rooftop is quiet, save for the soft sigh of a breeze passing over damp cloth and papyrus mat, rustling like pages turning in a book you've already read in another life. You shift slightly on your mat, the woven texture pressing gently into your skin, familiar now. It's not luxury. It's something better, comfort born from ritual. From intention. Someone nearby coughs softly. A clay cup clinks against stone. And then silence returns, thicker now, as if the night is wrapping itself more tightly around you. You listen to the city breathe. Below, in the alleys and courtyards, life has settled. Water jars glisten in moonlight. Goats are sleeping, noses tucked under legs. The village cat has claimed your sandals, curled into them like a sphinx on vacation. A donkey somewhere huffs and resettles in its shade hut. Even the frogs near the irrigation channel seem to croak more slowly now. You pull the cloth tighter across your chest. The scent of mint and plaster is stronger in the cooler air, and your limbs, heavy and warm from the day, finally start to feel like they belong to the earth again. Amo stirs, a few paces away. He mumbles in his sleep, something about reeds, or dinner, or possibly both, and rolls onto his side. His daughter, near the wall, has her hand stretched out toward a small jar of water, just in case. And you? You feel the chill of evaporated droplets still lingering on your wrist. It's not cold. It's enough. The brilliance of ancient Egyptian cooling wasn't found in dramatic inventions. It was found in noticing. In listening. In honoring wind and water and stillness. In soaking the mat and remembering to hang it. In wrapping clay jars in linen and letting shade do the work. Historians still argue over so many things, dates, dynasties, gods, political motives. But here, on this rooftop, the real answer settles in your bones like cooled stone. This was how you survived the sun. Not by fighting it, but by making peace with it. You think back to the reed marshes in the morning light, where every stalk whispered resilience. To the temple, where gods were offered shade and stone and still air. To the beer, thick and strange but strangely right. To the goats with their shaded spa corners, the chickens under spinning fans, the nobles wading into pools to quiet their souls. You remember the sound of wet cloth being wrung out. The feel of coal drying on your eyelids. The first breath of cooled air through a freshly soaked mat. And in this moment, stretched beneath the stars, you feel no hurry. No pressure. No heat. Only stillness. Only breath. Only breeze. The moon climbs higher. Time slows. Even your thoughts stop reaching. There is nothing more to know. No secret left. Just the gentle truth that you are here, and the heat is not. The walls around you do not glow. The floor does not hum with wires. The coolness you feel has no switch, no filter, no cord. It has care. It has rhythm. It has reed and water, clay and patience. You close your eyes. And with that, the story, like the day, finally drifts into silence. And now, you are still. No movement. No plans. No heat trailing your every thought. Just the quiet hush of night, pressing softly against your cheeks like linen dried in shade. You're lying on the rooftop still, at least in your mind. The breeze has not stopped. The stars above blink slowly, like ancient guardians keeping their own kind of time. And the walls around you are not made of modern things. They are mud brick and silence and memory. Let your breath slow. Inhale gently through your nose. Hold it for a moment, then exhale through your lips. Again. Let the weight of your body settle. Into the mattress. The mat. The earth. Wherever you are, let gravity have you, just for now. You don't need to be anywhere else. The sounds of the ancient world still hum faintly. The flap of a papyrus mat in the wind. The soft chime of water in a shallow bowl. A whisper, maybe, or a lullaby sung to the gods of sun and breeze and home. There's no more sun to fight. No more steps to take. Only the rhythm of your breath, the softness of the dark, and the cool memory of a world that found peace in patience. You are safe. You are held. And everything you need to rest is already around you. Already, within you. Sleep well, traveler. You've made it through the heat.